Hi everybody and welcome to the second video about the bishop b5 check knight d7 Sicilian. As I said in the previous video, we're going to be covering what I consider to be the main line of this variation right now, which happens after bishop d3, knight f6, rook e1 and b5. Now, to really understand why I consider this the main line, I think it's important to have a look at one of my first games in this variation, which was against one of the experts of this variation, Radoslav Wojtaszek from Poland. And here I played the move a4, which, if you saw the previous video, is very much in the spirit of what we were doing in some of the other lines. I had in mind that in case of certain c4 lines, my bishop can go back to f1, which we sort of defined to be more accurate in many of the lines. So I figured that a4 should be a good move over here. Now Wojtaszek played b4 here against me, and I pretty much continued the regular way with c3, bishop to b7, bishop c2, and here he played queen c7. Now, it may not look very smart, but at the time of the game I did not really understand what was happening here, and I played the move d4. Now, I played c takes b4 followed by d4. Virtually comes to the same thing because we always want to take back on d4 with the pawn anyway. And here Wojtaszek showed a very nice idea, which I think may or may not have been preparation for, at the time, the Vichy Anand match against Magnus Carlsen. Magnus once again likes to play the bishop b5 check Sicilian, and Wojtaszek at the time was one of Vichy's main seconds. So this was some serious preparation. Black went rook to c8, bishop d3. So as I said, all the general sort of principles from the previous videos apply. We go bishop d3, we're not worried. However, it turned out that now knight takes e4 is possible. And the trick is actually fairly simple. After bishop takes e4, suddenly our bishop on c1 is hanging. And of course I didn't go for this because here we're full pawn down, but after knight takes e4 I believe I continued with queen to e2, something like that, and later on I got to win the a pawn. And this has been tried a little bit more after my game by white, but the exchange of this a pawn for one of the central pawns is not really one that you should be aiming for. I believe that black can go back here and later on use a d5 square now for his knight. It's not at all the type of position that we are aiming for in this variation. So what exactly was so smart about this move order, b5? Well, the idea is that even though black of course has to develop, he can actually stop us from gaining the center by putting two pieces on the c-file, and we can pretty much not do anything in order to prevent him from having this trick with knight takes e4, aiming for our bishop. What some players have tried to do over here is to play something like d3, then slowly but surely preparing the d4 break later, but that's not really something I'm very satisfied with as white, and I wouldn't recommend you to play it. I think it's sort of proving black's point that he can stop us from doing our central plan. Another way that you can play is to go c3 immediately, but here we face similar issues. Queen to c7, and the same trick here still holds. Takes, rook to c8, and we're falling for some stuff on e4, and c1 once again is hanging. Of course, after knight c3, b4, we're also in trouble here. So it is this move on b5 that black players from that moment onward started to follow after this game, and I think this became the main line very quickly. Now white had to come up with something new, otherwise black's plan of putting the queen and rook on the c-file was going to simply counter the whole line. And it was, I believe, once again Magnus Carlsen who introduced c4, or at least he brought it to my attention when he played this several times against Nakamura and most recently against Grishuk and Veselin Topalov. So once again Magnus is actually at the forefront of this variation. c4, as I said, is a completely different game, and here black has two major options. Now, before going to the main line, which is the surprising move g5, and this has been highly covered in recent games, especially by Grishuk and once again Carlsen. Grishuk on the black side, and Magnus has been playing this already twice on the white side. Well, this, as you can imagine, is a completely different line on its own. I want to focus on b takes c4 first because that's what I struggled with in my own game after I started playing c4. And after takes, well, one important thing to notice is that black would like to stop d4, and the best way to do that is by playing e5, but now knight to g5 would cause him serious problems. So one way he could decide to play instead is e6, but I don't think this is really something to recommend, because after d4 takes, you might not get the type of position that you are looking for initially as a bishop b5 check player, but it is important to realize that we actually have a position here which kind of resembles, or strongly resembles, an open Sicilian, but we have a very annoying idea of bishop takes e6 in virtually all of the arising positions. So for example, bishop to e7 will be the classical mistake. We go bishop takes e6, takes, knight takes, and it is always problematic here for black to play with such an open king. And as you can see, we have 3 pawns. We have very nice development coming through soon. So this is a bad position for black. Black could play after e6 d4 is, for example, queen c7, attacking our bishop. Now bishop takes e6 might be possible, but the pawn on g7 is not hanging, so I wouldn't recommend it. Instead, knight to a3. Maybe not a very pretty move, but it does speed up our development, and that's more important at this point. For example, queen b7, attacking the e-pawn, and here there's already some funny tricks coming with bishop a4, and bishop is coming to c6, so this is not a very good position for black, and if you're interested in more of the details, I recommend you to look at the ebook. So e6 I don't think is something we're going to see a lot. It's leading to very dangerous positions, and this bishop takes e6 idea is something that we're going to see a little bit more in the upcoming lines. Now I think the best move here is knight to b6. And initially, my idea here for white, and I actually managed to play it in one of my games, was to go bishop to f1. And we still probably want to go d4 because I'm not sure how well the knight on b6 is placed. So black should go e5. And here, my game from 2015 against Talbaron, when b4 takes, and I believe d4 was played here, following up with a3, and it's kind of a gambit which at the time seemed very promising to me, but if you look up the game, I didn't quite reach what I wanted to reach, and black equalized. So even though it's a very nice looking idea, I wouldn't recommend anyone to really follow it, because if black is up to date and he knows a little bit of the analysis, or he has done a little bit of analysis on that line, it's not going to really serve you that well. Instead, after knight b6, I recommend the slightly slower move d3, which is a lot more dangerous than I initially thought it would be. Now the first idea of this move is that after e5, which is, I guess you could consider the sort of main idea, is that we go bishop to d2. And bishop to d2 is quite an annoying move because we're planning to go bishop to a5, which is a very annoying pin for black to face, and after that we can go knight c3, knight d5, for example, or knight c3, knight a4 could be an idea. So it's almost forcing black to either play a5 or play knight takes c4. Now if black plays a5, we can go bishop b5 check, and here I like the move a4, bishop e7, knight a3, and even though this structure might not look that impressive at first, over here white actually does have an advantage. We can go bishop to c3, and now the idea would be knight d2, knight b3 as indicated by arrows, and there's pretty serious pressure on the a-pawn. Also the c4 square, as soon as if we ever manage to force the knight to move away from it, then knight c4 will be another idea, and it just seems quite one-sided as white has some targets here and black is really lacking some sort of constructive plan. So instead of a5, knight takes c4 is the other move, but also this structure does not really appeal to me as black. The only way that black could really make this work normally is if he would manage to put a knight to d4, well, as we can see, that knight is very far from reaching that. And for example, after bishop e6, knight c3, using the fact that we still have queen a4 check here, if black decides to take on c4, bishop h6, knight d5, I think that we have quite a nice initiative And we don't even necessarily have to go for knight d5. It's one of the options. One of the key ideas after knight d5 is to put another knight on a very nice square, using the fact that h6 is a little bit weakening, although it's a necessary move for black because bishop g5 would leave us in a very, very good position. But the other move here would be to go just b3 and slowly but surely put pressure on the d file. Also a nice position for white in my opinion. So all of these lines look fairly promising, and I don't think I think actually that's the reason that people haven't been following my game there as much. Not because of bishop f1 like I played, but because of the simple d3. Now the other line here would be e6, which once again leaves black in a slightly awkward version of the open Sicilian type of position. I recommend you to go bishop to b3, bishop e7 for example, and now d4, takes. Now normally, of course, black would like to go bishop to b7, very much in the spirit of the Sicilian, and maybe play d5 later in some cases, but again he's faced with this bishop takes e6 idea, and as I said earlier, it's virtually always problematic in this type of position. And also here we're going to develop, most likely black is running into all sorts of trouble if he takes on e4, maybe even rook takes and queen h5 immediately, and this is just not something that black can allow. So the natural move, bishop to b7, does not really work, and after bishop d7, which is a little bit more solid, because he does have to prevent knight c6, after bishop d7, knight c3 castle, queen e2, I do think that white has a pretty pleasant position after bishop g5, bringing the rook to d1, and as you can see, in a way black has a normal open Sicilian looking position, but the mixture of bishop on d7 and the knight on b6 is a little bit awkward, and I think that white maybe even can go for plans with f4, e5 later on, and I do like white's prospects over here. So that's sort of the normal way for black, you could say. After c4, as you can see, there are some direct issues. Another thing is that after b4, a3, white is probably gonna either he has to weaken his structure, or he has to allow a takes b4, c takes b4, when d4 will be very pleasant for white later on with a big center. So mostly after b takes c4, bishop takes c4, we're planning to go d4, and it's a lot more dangerous than it might seem at first because of the bishop takes e6 sacrifice. That's why g5 I think came to be and has become, in fact, I would say the most popular move in this position. And this is one of the few lines in my repertoire where things can get so wild that you can very easily lose the overview, or simply have your memory fail you based on the fact that it's full of computer moves and crazy analysis. So what I've really tried to do in this line is to keep it as simple as possible. One of the crazy lines here would be c takes b5, g4, knight h4. And then black can go e6, and well, as you can see, the position is quite crazy, but black is basically arguing that his pawn sacrifice on b5 is in a way a positional pawn sacrifice, as it has granted him access to the e5 square. Our knight on h4 is quite misplaced, and he's probably just going to continue with castle and kind of treat it almost like a Benko gambit or something like that. So I wouldn't recommend this because it's very hard for white to play, even though you're a pawn up. Another way for white to play is the move e5 over here, which has been played I think 2 or 3 times, one time against Vishy Anand's black. And after takes knight g5, once again, it's an interesting position. I just don't really like it because I don't understand the ideas anymore. It's very concrete, and it's not suiting everyone's style, let's put it that way. Some people love to play these computerish lines. I personally try to stay away from them when I can. So what is my solution? My solution is to take on g5 immediately. Now the move for black is knight e5, with the simple idea of taking on c4 next, and we have to remove our bishop. Magnus Carlsen went for the move bishop to e2 here, and after b takes c4, knight c3, Grishuk played rook to b8, which was a highly complicated game and might have been a bit better for white, and also the move rook g8, novelty, which is a novelty suggested by the computer, is quite unclear in my opinion. Surely there is a lot of research to be done there, but I like to keep things simple by going bishop to f1, which is a fairly rare move. I think it was only seen in one game, which was not played among grandmasters. So b takes c4 once again is the move here, and after d4, black is pretty much forced to take c takes d3. If he does decide to take on d4, then we can go f4, and it might look a little bit crazy, but in fact what we're really trying to do is just kick the knight out of this good square, take on c4, attack f7, and then take the pawn back on d4, so it's only temporarily that it looks a little bit crazy. Now knight d3 would probably be the best move, but after takes, and e5, it seems to be better for white, as black has just a very poor pawn structure. For example, takes, h6 is one of the lines, and after something like this, a lot of pieces are exchanged, and in the end, we can sort of bring it back to the basics and say that, well, we're going to put our knight to f3, our king is safe, the pawn on d3 will be lost one way or another, and most importantly, black's king is just really out there in the middle of the board and doesn't really have a safe haven in any part of the board. So it's better for white. Instead, c takes d3 is probably the move that most black players plan to play over here, and now once again I want to go f4. So I'm giving the pawn back, and I just want to get my pieces out as quickly as possible, and really I want to steer the game into something that I can sort of understand rather than calculate and learn by heart. So here black has two moves, knight c6 and bishop g4. After knight c6, black allows us to go for a pretty harmonious sort of setup. After bishop takes d3, bishop g7, h3, stopping all sorts of bishop g4 ideas. Castle, knight c3. What this reminds me of is kind of I would say almost a close Sicilian, like a Grand Prix attack, but we're not a pawn down, black has no g-pawn, and I think in the long run this should be quite dangerous for black. For example, rook f1, queen e1, or maybe just queen e2, queen f2, and then following up with bringing the queen to the king side. I think this position is just easier for white to play. It's by no means very bad for black, but I wouldn't be very comfortable. Another thing that black has to do is always watch out for e5, because it could loosen up his king side. Specifically the knight that defends very well from f6 right now. So for example, the following line in queen f2, white can continue sometimes with f5, queen h4, or just bishop e3 and e5 is on the cards. So honestly, in this position I would feel very comfortable as white. And even though it's not anymore really a Sicilian position or anything that resembles a normal opening position, I think just by concluding that white has pretty good central play and has a saver king, we can sort of deduce that this should be quite a good position for white. Instead, I think that the move bishop to g4 over here is probably what black players should go for. It disturbs our setup a little bit. After check over here, it looks like we might win a piece, but black can actually go bishop to d7 or queen to d7. And as you can see, we need to trade queens and he will be able to return his knight. But bishop d7 I think is also one of the moves that he could play. So instead, once again, to try and keep things as simple as possible, we have to temporarily go for a slightly odd looking move, queen to d2. Now black will probably play knight c6 again, and of course our queen on d2 is not looking that great, so we play queen takes d3 now. So in this position I think h6 should be played by black, simply because there are sometimes ideas with queen b3 and attacking f7, and it generally seems like a normal idea to kick our knight back. So knight to f3, bishop g7, and as we can see, the general tendency and the general structure over here is not that different from the previous line. And after, let's say, knight c3, knight to d7, already preparing to really gain access over the dark squares. Black is looking to trade on f3 and maybe put a knight or a bishop on d4 and try to get some play over the b file. I like these types of plans for black, but I just don't like the fact that we don't have a g-pawn, and I think that should tell in the end, because white is going to be able to set up some sort of attack here. So to be very precise, I think the move rook to b1, already preparing for ideas related to rook b8 and so on, is precise, and after rook b8 the move a3 is quite strong. The main idea is that in case we play another move, like for example bishop to e2 here, imagine look at bishop e2 and h3, so we can take back with the bishop here, then black might be able to launch some sort of counterplay with c4 and bring the knight to d3, also bring in the queen with check. So I don't want to allow any of the regular sort of concrete counterplay, and the best way to do that is by making these two prophylactic moves: rook b1, a3, stopping knight b4, and now we can start thinking about bishop e2, h3, maybe get the bishop pair in that way, and then at some point black is going to have to castle, probably kingside, and I just think that the king is going to be unsafe. It's not easy for black to trade off many more pieces without making serious concessions. So once again, my idea is not to refute the line by force, but I do like my positions and my prospect over here as white, and I would really recommend trying this out in case your opponent tries to go for g5, because it honestly doesn't require that much knowledge from the white side, whereas black, as we could see from some of the lines I showed, he has to be prepared in many different variations. And yeah, this once again, this emphasizes the general idea of the repertoire, which is to keep it as simple as possible and not go too deep into very forced lines. So I hope you like this recommendation against knight d7. If you have questions or any comments, please feel free to let me know under the comment section on the video. I do read those. And thank you for watching. Next on we'll be looking at the bishop d7 line.